Hello, everyone, and welcome to Why Wasn't It Better? I'm your host, Patrick Darms.
Yeah, I'm your co-host, Anton Paras.
And the film that we are talking about today, Anton, is the 20th anniversary of War of the Worlds.
Well, if there's anything that I've learned continuing to do this podcast, Pat, is every time we do multiple year anniversaries, whether 20 years for a film that I think felt like it was just yesterday in theaters, I feel old.
I feel like we say that with every anniversary film we cover that we
Yeah.
saw in theaters. You saw this in theaters, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting one to talk about. I hadn't seen this in a good 15 years, maybe more.
And I told you I watched it twice in theaters and then once a few years after.
Well, a real quick bit of admin, a reminder to all of our listeners that we have our Patreon up and running. We also have various levels of YouTube subscriptions that if you are a YouTube listener / watcher and you really love our content, you can contribute to our continued success via monetary means, if that is your calling. Any other admin that you have, Anton?
Just wanted to call it out there. It's a classic Pat and Anton episode, so hope you're ready, listeners. Dock worker Ray Ferrier struggles to build a positive relationship with his two children, Rachel and Robbie. When his ex-wife, Marianne, drops them off at Ray's house, it seems as though it will be just another tension-filled weekend. However, when electromagnetic pulses of lightning strike the area, the strange event turns out to be the beginning of an alien invasion, and Ferrier must now protect his children as they seek refuge. They're already here. Released on June 29, 2005 by Amblin Entertainment, Cruise Wagner Productions, DreamWorks Pictures, and Paramount Pictures. Directed by Steven Spielberg, with a screenplay by Josh Friedman and David Koepp, based on The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. Starring Tom Cruise, Dakota Fanning, Justin Chatwin, Miranda Otto, and Tim Robbins, with a budget of $132 million, $212 million adjusted for inflation, with a box office of $603 million, so $972 million adjusted for inflation. Okay, so it's the 20th anniversary of War of the Worlds. Pat, why are we talking about this one today?
Because the hype for this at the time was incredible. Steven Spielberg directing Tom Cruise in an alien invasion movie, an adaptation of a very, very famous book. It seemed like a slam dunk at the time. And when I went to see this in the theaters, like everybody else, I had really enjoyed their first collaboration together a couple years before, Minority Report, which I think is a brilliant film. And I had very, very high expectations for this. Prior to this recording, Anton, I sent you the teaser trailer. It's a banger.
Yep.
Yeah, the hype for this was huge. I was positive that this would be an instant classic. I saw this, I want to say the Friday that it came out. Me and all my friends went, and it seemed like everyone had the same reaction. The set pieces gave us everything we wanted. The other stuff didn't. If you look at all the metrics, it was a big success, right? You said the box office, right? $600 million. That's a lot of money. It has a 76 Rotten Tomatoes score. And yet, 20 years on, I would say this film has a very curious legacy. I don't think you can call it a classic because of the title and the involvement of Spielberg and Cruise. It's very well known, but you rarely hear it mentioned these days. Nobody really seems to love it. What do you think?
I mean, you make a ton of great points, and one thing I want to add, that 2005 is a year that we visited before for film, and there's a lot of big competitors in 2005. We already talked about Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which is in that top 10 for box office then, Peter Jackson's King Kong, and we had a Harry Potter movie in this year. So I feel
there
like
were a lot of big movies in 2005.
A lot of big movies. And at the end of the day, this is one of those films which I think there's so much prestige when you think about these big studios and the older stories they're looking to tell. This film felt to me like a bit of an homage to old Hollywood and just being able to kind of create and transform a property. Similar to like the story of King Kong. Do something bigger than life itself. But at the end of the day, really doesn't have as much staying power as a lot of the bigger films of that era. And like you said, on paper, it really should. So very curious to see and dig in as we discuss the War of the Worlds.
Really quick, because you mentioned you saw it in the theater as well. Your reaction was similar to mine?
I remember my reaction was I was excited. I enjoyed it. It definitely fit all the needs of like 2005 Anton, which was, it's got a lot of action in there and some thriller and suspense. But
You didn't love it.
I didn't love it. I didn't
Do you
love it.
know anyone that loves it? Because this is, I mean, a Spielberg movie usually is going to evoke strong reactions.
I think of many other Spielberg films before I think of this one. I think of many other Tom Cruise films before I think of this one. I think of The Terminal more than I think of this movie.
No, you don't.
In general, like if I had
The
to count,
Terminal?
if I had to count on my hand how many times I thought of The Terminal in the past 3 years versus War of the Worlds, probably more times for The Terminal, admittedly.
Well, that's the point, right? This should be one of the best remembered films of its era. And maybe you know someone who I don't. I do not know a single person who loves this movie.
I don't. I really don't.
Now,
It's
conversely, I don't know a single person who hates this movie either. And I think that may be why it doesn't have the legacy that some other films do.
I think we are scratching the surface on some of the reasons that we're going to be digging into. So perhaps should we try to avoid the mob and head into our production history?
Let's do it. So after enjoying making Minority Report together in 2002, Spielberg and Cruise wanted to collaborate again. While Spielberg was busy filming Catch Me If You Can, this would have been immediately after they made Minority Report, Cruise met with him and he presented to him 3 ideas. Spielberg picked War of the Worlds. I'm curious what the other 2 ideas were. But alas. So producer and longtime collaborator Kathleen Kennedy said that with War of the Worlds, Spielberg had the opportunity to explore the antithesis of the characters brought to life in E.T. and Close Encounters. Quote, when we first started developing E.T., it was a much edgier, darker story, and it actually had evolved into something that was more benign. I think the edgier, darker story has always been somewhere inside him. Now he's telling that story, end quote. Spielberg stated that he thought it would be fun to make a, quote, really scary film with really scary aliens, end quote, something that had never been done before by him. And he described it as a polar opposite to Close Encounters, with that movie featuring a man leaving his family to travel with aliens, although you could argue that's kind of dark.
Yeah.
While War of the Worlds focused on keeping the family together. It was Spielberg's idea to set the story in present day, and additionally, it was his directive that the story be entirely told from Tom Cruise's character's POV. J.J. Abrams was asked by Spielberg and Cruise to write the script, but he had to turn them down as he was working on the pilot for Lost. I'd say that worked out for J.J. Abrams.
Yeah, I mean, we're entering the era for J.J. Abrams, which is the mid-2000s, so this worked.
Yeah, think about that, though, that sliding doors moment. Most people,
you say
turn down
to
a job offer from Tom Cruise and Steven Spielberg, it's disastrous for your career, and yet not so for J.J. Abrams.
No, he got his bag.
Yeah, he knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
Josh Friedman ended up writing the first draft of the screenplay, which was then rewritten by long-term collaborator David Koepp. And film buffs will, of course, know the name David Koepp very well. He is, of course, I would say, by all metrics, he's the most successful Hollywood screenwriter of the past several decades, wouldn't you say?
We've talked about him a lot on the show.
Yeah, I mean, he wrote Jurassic Park, The Lost World Jurassic Park, the first Spider-Man. You know, he's done a lot of ghostwriting on a lot of other projects. Very, very successful career, and he's still going strong. After rereading the novel, Koepp decided to do the script following a single narrator, quote, a very limited point of view, from someone on the very periphery of events rather than someone evolved in events, end quote. And he created a list of elements that he would not use due to being cliche, such as the destruction of landmark buildings. So basically, Anton, what I think they decided to do is they were like, let's do the total opposite of Independence Day.
Yeah, and let's not make as much of a fuss as King Kong right now, because you know he's about to climb the Empire State Building.
And for all of our listeners, we are covering King Kong later this year. Also for the 20th anniversary.
The very underratedly horrifying King Kong.
Yes, I would agree with you. And I would say this film too, underratedly horrifying.
I was just as much like terrified as a youngin seeing this, but I think it also probably feels a lot different being an adult and seeing like, oh yeah, that people would act like this.
It feels different being an adult and as someone who is about to welcome their first child into the world.
Oh my gosh, so true. Like,
Totally different. By the time this film comes out, both you and I will be fathers.
yes.
So
So
there you go. While changing the setting from the 19th century to the present day, Kep also tried to take the modern world back to the 1800s with the characters being devoid of electricity and modern techniques of communication. Spielberg accepted the script after finding it had similarities to his personal life, including the divorce of his parents, and because the plight of the fictional survivors reflects his own uncertainty after the devastation of the September 11th attacks. Spielberg originally intended to make this film after Munich with a intended 2007 release, but Tom Cruise convinced him to postpone Munich while he would do the same with Mission Impossible 3. Pre-production on this only took 3 months, half the amount of time normally allotted for a film of similar size and scope. And Spielberg noted, however, quote, "This was not a cram course for War of the Worlds. This was my longest schedule in about 12 years. We took our time," end quote. He made The Terminal the year before this. He makes this film and Munich in less than a year. So he basically makes 3 films in less than 2 years.
you could argue that some of the films listed are a bit less intensive. I'm looking at you, The Terminal.
You could, but still, I mean, how many filmmakers could do that?
Uwe Ball. I can list a lot of directors
Wait, sorry. I'm asking how many filmmakers could make films like this?
not many.
Okay,
So
yeah.
there we go.
Sorry. For the first time in his career, Spielberg used digital pre-visualization for his storyboards at the suggestion of his friend, George Lucas. Bill Murray was the top choice to play the part that eventually went to Tim Robbins. That's insane. He was busy filming The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. That's a film we need to cover, I think.
Yeah, I think that the aesthetic of that film has really lasted over time. People really dig the aesthetic of the aquatic life.
Oh, I quite like it, but it was a box office bomb.
Yeah, but very cult classic.
Just think about the Tim Robbins role if it had been played by Bill Murray. Just wild.
Well, that was the thing for me watching that with Tim Robbins. It still felt like Tim Robbins watching it throughout, so I couldn't help but feel like part of it was an SNL skit. So I could only imagine with Bill Murray in a similar role.
I don't see how that works. I mean, or
Steve
Michael
Ma-
Madsen, maybe?
Steve Martin, maybe?
Michael Madsen in Scary Movie. Was it Scary Movie 4?
4, which was hilarious.
When we build our tripods, they'll have 4 legs. Miranda Otto's real-life pregnancy was written into the film. Her character was simply shown to be pregnant. This hits close to my former home for me, Anton, having been Jersey City. Ray's house was located in Bayonne, New Jersey. The scene of the tripod emerging from the ground was filmed in Newark. Additional filming took place in Virginia, Connecticut, New Jersey, California, and New York, upstate New York.
I have a question. Do you know if Tom Cruise actually is a Yankees fan?
I honestly don't know. He has expressed interest in both the Yankees and the Mets, as far as I know, which is quite strange. He's also expressed admiration for Brett Favre when he was playing for the Jets. The answer to your question is I don't know.
Okay, that's fair.
But he's a Yankees fan in this film, and that's the only thing that matters.
Yeah, because how else do you set up those really fun jokes about Yankees and Red Sox?
Exactly. Doing the research for this film made me remember certain things. Spielberg was adamant about maintaining a strict level of secrecy throughout filming. Much of the cast was kept in the dark about the entirety of the screenplay. I remember reading about that. Like, oh yeah, there's going to be like this big reveal, which there's not really.
I think that's hilarious to me because it's like, well, you could just read the book or see everything about.
Right. Now, I think one thing they did really well with the secrecy stuff is, if you recall from the trailers, they did not reveal what the tripods or the aliens looked like, which was a very wise decision when you're making a movie trailer for something.
That's true. The principal photography lasted 73 days from November 2004 to March 2005. The ferry scene was filmed in the upstate New York town of Athens, and Marianne's parents' house was located in Brooklyn, standing in for Boston. Take that, Boston. For the neighborhood plane crash scene, the production crew brought a retired Boeing 747 formerly operated by All Nippon Airways, dismantling it into several pieces and built houses around them. at a total cost of $2 million. The destroyed plane was kept for the Universal Studios backlot tour, which, Pat, I mentioned that was a very memorable part when I went on the Universal backlot tour growing up. So it was a very, very fun part, a very memorable part. The other memorable parts were seeing the house from Psycho, and you also get to see a lot of the Jaws set, which is really fun. So highly recommend the Universal Studios backlot tour. Industrial Light and Magic handled all the visual effects, and in order to keep the realism, the usage of computer-generated imagery shots and blue screen was limited, with most of the digital effects being blended with miniature and live-action footage. The aliens themselves had designs based on jellyfish, with movements inspired by red-eyed tree frogs, and amphibian quality, particularly on the wet skin. Spielberg did not want any blood or gore during the heat ray deaths. In the words of visual effects supervisor Pablo Hellman, quote, "This was going to be a horror movie for kids," end quote. So the effects crew came up with the vaporization of the bodies, and considering it could not be fully digital due to both the complexity of the effect and the schedule, live action dust was used alongside the CGI ray assimilation and particles. Spielberg did not want any blood or gore, but the implication of blood and tissue creating the spores, that's fine.
Sidebar on that. You don't need blood and gore in this movie. It manages to be horrifying without it.
Yeah, that's more of an implied horror.
I think my favorite shot in the film is that woman who's running in the streets. And it's not quite slow motion, but it's a close up of her face when she's getting vaporized, and like her scream gets frozen in place for a second. It's horrifying.
I think my favorite is they're the two individuals that were running through the streets and they get vaporized, and then all of their like necklaces and jewelry fall to the ground. Oh wait, that was Scary Movie 4. It was really funny. So Spielberg started shooting Munich in the day War of the Worlds premiered, June 23rd. He had Munich completely shot, edited, and scored in time for its theatrical release on December 23rd, 2005, which is very impressive. Prior to its release, the film was reported as the most expensive ever made, with an alleged $250 million budget. This was debunked. The film's budget was about half that. So, loved this trailer. So, we talked about, or you sent me the text of the Super Bowl teaser trailer for this. And Pat, do you think trailer quality nowadays is any good?
Yes and no. I would imagine there are still great trailers, but YouTube, I think, has diluted the effectiveness as a trailer, because prior to YouTube, you either saw it in a theater or you saw it on TV, and those were the only two formats where you could see a movie trailer. And I think it was more effective and more memorable, but I'm sure there are still great trailers.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember the Dune trailers being really good. Of course, anytime you see a trailer for a Christopher Nolan movie, I feel like it's good.
That's fair. I just feel like so many films nowadays, I'm just getting too much exposition and every story beat in the trailer, which I don't love, or just big reveals. The Wicked trailer is literally the movie, including when all the twists, they include it in the trailer. But with this trailer, we had basically no footage from the actual movie. Small town, seeing the flashes from the battle on the other side of the hills, which is really, really cool. I don't really think that they do that much nowadays.
No, especially with footage not even being shot for the movie. And it was a different narrator. It wasn't our friend Morgan Freeman.
Trailers nowadays, there's a lot of emphasis on what's going to get butts and seats, which I think studios have gone less mysterious, more we really want to show you the big reveal.
I agree with you. They feel less effective.
But this film made $100 million in 4 days. And 2 months before the release, Paramount debuted a human survival online game on its official website to promote the film. Did not
play this? Are you familiar with this?
I did not play the game. I looked at footage of it. This was also the time of like miniclip.com and albinoblacksheep.com. There were way better games to play online. Do you remember that? Newgrounds.com?
No.
Oh man, so many good internet flash games.
Here's a throwback for you, Anton. This grossed over $100 million in DVD sales. That does not happen anymore.
No. That is fun. That is a fun stat.
You mentioned 2005.
Yes.
Here's some trivia time for you.
All
This
right.
was the 4th highest grossing film of the year. Which 3 films were ahead of it?
Harry Potter for sure at number
Yeah,
one.
Goblet of Fire. Yeah, that was number 1.
Yeah, 2005. Right. So Star Wars.
Yeah,
And
Revenge of the
then
Sith.
King Kong.
Number 3 is, this may shock you. King Kong was behind this.
Okay. Batman.
Nope.
Ooh, I feel like I'm close.
It's the first film in a franchise. It is a
Okay.
movie we are going to cover later this year.
So we've already gone over. So there's no way that
Massively famous IP.
so it's not Pirates because we've already
Nope.
had a few Pirates films. So, but it's the first you said.
It's the first. It's not the first book, but it's the first film. It's fantasy.
Series of unfortunate events.
No,
Man, give me a hint.
it's a fantasy IP.
Is there what like are we talking? We talking elves? Are we talking what's going on?
There aren't elves in it, but there are magical creatures in it. It is often called a children's series, but it was not intended to be.
Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Yes.
Oh man.
Yeah, that was a huge moneymaker.
If you would have just said Turkish Delight, I would have.
Right. Yeah, I didn't want to give it away because it's
Yeah,
fantasy.
that would have been really But
anyway, yeah, that was number 3. That was a big moneymaker.
It was, but they did not keep investing in that franchise.
No, we're going to cover that way later in the year. I think the problem with that franchise is The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, for whatever reason, seems to be way more famous and way more beloved by casual readers than all the other books, even though all the other books are fantastic.
I was going to say, like, Prince Caspian's pretty dope.
I agree with you, but is it as famous as Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe? No.
No, but, like, Prince Caspian's probably one of, like, my favorites. You know, Pat, why don't you round this out with a fun little quote from our good friend, Mr. Steve?
I found this quote from Spielberg in an interview that he was doing with Tom Cruise for the now defunct Movie Web. Do you remember Movie Web?
Mm-hmm.
Or Movie Phone? Or one of those movie somethings?
It's Movie Phone.
It's where they ask each other questions. It's two celebrities will ask each other questions submitted by fans, and then they will answer them. And Spielberg said, I don't even remember what the question was, but his answer was very long and detailed, but he ended it with, quote, "That's the secret. I'm more interested in the storyteller that doesn't know anything about where to put the camera than someone who knows everything about the camera but nothing about the story process," end quote. And I'm like, yes, Steven Spielberg, you're right.
Yeah, such an innovator and such an eye for...
The man knows blocking.
Yeah, that's true. Let's talk about why wasn't War of the Worlds better?
I want to talk about the first half of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just about perfect.
It's an awesome first half. I agree with you there.
It's one of the best first halves of any movie I've ever seen.
If they could have kind of played it out to... Man, I'm trying to think because it's like it's so perfectly paced in the first half. I'm almost wondering, is there like a perfect film in this movie if you just kind of cut out all the trimmings and make sure that the focal point is the first half of this movie?
I don't know, because of the ending, which we'll talk about.
Yeah, the ending, Tim Robbins, the stuff with like his son.
I rewatched this past weekend and then again yesterday to prepare for this. And I had all these flashbacks of seeing this in the theater with my friends and like, God damn, this was a good theater movie.
Yeah, this is the perfect kind of film to have, like, you know, this was like beginning of summer, right?
Yeah.
And so this is exactly what you're looking for, especially like I was about like 11 or 12 at the time. Very, very excited to go see this film.
So I was a little older. I was 17. And it was like, well, you know what I would say about this now? If you have a shitty TV and you don't have like at least a sound bar with like a subwoofer, I wouldn't even bother watching this movie. Like this movie requires a big screen, good quality TV and a good sound system. Otherwise, you're just not going to get the full experience. And I understand you made this point to me earlier before we recorded about how like the bigger the screen, the better this movie's going to be. And you're right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, you see this movie in theaters, you're going to think about it a little bit, you know?
Yeah. And you know, all the way back when we reviewed Avatar: The Way of Water, and I remarked to you how, like, you didn't see that in theaters and I did. I'm like, it was awesome in the theater, even though it's a boring movie, essentially. But, like, I'm going to see the next Avatar movie in the theaters because I know it's going to be a good experience.
Versus like having just watched it in my living room. We have a good sound system. I have a massive TV,
Same.
but it just didn't feel quite the same.
Anton, I would say the first half of this movie, War of the Worlds, the set pieces are spectacular. I think it's some of the best stuff Spielberg's ever done.
Yeah, the more I think about it, I feel like what we can appreciate here is if you were to submit the first half of this film on like a technical level, like how do you execute and tell a story, pacing, blocking, cinematography, music, this is like mastery on a technical level.
Sound design, CGI.
Just because it really does fit and like hit all those check boxes of what you want to see. A lot of show not tell, a lot of characterization through dialogue, a lot of earned moments based on just characterization and proper storytelling. You believe everything about the main character based on his interactions with other people. He knows cars, or he loves his family, but it's not perfect. Like, it's very much sets this up to be not only a believable story about these characters going through something fantastical and crazy, but then also presents it in a way that builds a suspense over time in a very, very high neck break speed.
The first hour of this film is a master class of not only spectacle, which is something that Spielberg's always excelled at, but escalation.
Yeah.
Every 5 minutes, the film goes tension-wise up a level, up a level, up a level, up a level. I'm going to keep repeating myself, so I'm going to stop. But so I actually timed this in between, the lightning strikes which is an awesome scene, by the way. Between that and when the tripod rises up out of the town square, it's 6 minutes. And it's some of the best 6 minutes I've ever seen in any movie ever.
Yeah, and it's very like go. And there's a few openings that I've seen to films that have really invoked a very similar sense of like panic, dread, and also just like urgency and suspense. A film that really comes to mind, have you ever seen like 28 Weeks Later?
Yeah.
Yeah, the opening to that film, I think, also kind of built this very like same claustrophobic, suspenseful opening. That was very much like the character has to escape, otherwise they're going to get overrun. A film that literally is just built on like next scene is literally just an adrenaline rush after the next scene, of course, is Uncut Gems. But I feel like these are all very different kinds of films. So especially within like a summer blockbuster, I think like on a technical level, like this is just very high quality for, I think, a category that usually sometimes you get films like the Jumanji sequel with The Rock in it.
Right. It's a popcorn movie, but it's gourmet popcorn.
Yeah, it's you got Popcornopolis right now.
Right. I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, this is Spielberg at his best. I would say again, if we're judging the whole film, I'm not comparing this to Jurassic Park because Jurassic Park is a way better movie. But the initial tripod attack, I would put right up there with the T-Rex attack in Jurassic Park. Like that's how good I think these set pieces are.
Yeah, I think that's where aesthetic choice of what's chosen to kind of represent the terror and the dread. I think the tripod's super novel, but I remember even like as a kid kind of thinking like, is that as dangerous as I think it could look? It looks weird, don't get me wrong. But I do remember kind of walking away from that thinking like, I don't know if personally I would have enjoyed like the tripods as much.
Enjoyed it? Maybe not, but
yeah,
it's brilliantly filmed.
Yeah, effective, very effective.
And again, it all comes back to what we were talking about in the production history, which was Spielberg and screenwriter David Koepp talking about everything in the movie is from Tom Cruise's POV.
Mm-hmm.
And this scene, almost exactly the same thing. If you notice, there is a single shot that is not from the POV of someone on the streets. It's one of the best shots in the film. I'm sure you remember it. It is the one wide shot, almost like a helicopter view of the the tripod rising up and towering over all of the row
Yeah.
houses. It's the only shot in the entire sequence that isn't at ground level, and it is incredibly effective.
It does a great job of just showing scale, and I feel like, especially for a movie this big, they do it really quickly and efficiently.
And everything you were alluding to earlier, the buildup of the characters and the dialogue, it's very quickly established who Tom Cruise's character is. His name's Ray Ferrier. His relationship with his wife, his relationship with his kids. All of this is set up, I think, perfectly in the first 10 minutes of the film. I think underrated acting from everyone involved. It's very efficient, frankly, underrated screenwriting.
Yeah. And it's also an adaptation of a property that's like, what, from the turn of the century? Yeah, so at the end of the day, like, if a ton of people aren't as compelled by the story or just the property, like, that makes sense. Like, I don't think that there's a ton of people talking about H.G. Wells in 2005, let alone like today. It's kind of the execution of how you kind of adapt that story and made it very relevant. You know, Spielberg did a great job of making it very relevant.
Yeah, I mean, the lightning strike that causes what's essentially an EMP.
Yeah.
Which kept talked about bringing it back to turn of the century 1900. By the way, did you notice Cruise's character is wearing a Omega, and a mechanical watch that would not have been taken out by an EMP?
That's smart. That's very smart. And he knows how to fix that van.
He knows how to fix the van. We're going to talk more about his character. What I would say now about him, good acting from Cruise, because you get the sense that he's like sort of a deadbeat, and yet he has a lot of street smarts.
Yeah, I got the sense that he has very clear flaws, and he's just doing his best to keep everything together, and that literally fits the story. He's doing his best to keep his family together. And so whether you kind of look at the aliens and the film as a metaphor for like a post 9/11 society, it could be it could be as close as like, how do you go through traumatic events like that, or even just how do you kind of navigate life just trying to keep your family together when all of these things get thrown at you.
That's certainly what Spielberg was going for, the 9/11 comparisons. I mean, it's impossible to talk about this film without talking about 9/11. There's a bunch of things in this film that were supposed to evoke that.
I mean, let's really think about it. It was only 4 years back.
Right.
So
it was still fresh in everyone's mind.
Yeah. Very fresh.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
Yeah.
Especially in that part of the country. Not that it wasn't in other parts, but...
No, but I will say for a fact, like, you know, being on the West Coast, of course, there was a very big, like, feeling of, like, patriotism rising and just wanting to be there for, like, the country. But I don't think that it hit as much on a personal level as people that, like, live on the East Coast, like, and either witnessed it, or I feel like everyone was almost 5 degrees separated from someone directly impacted.
Yeah, I mean, I was inadvertently. I mean, I grew up in New Jersey, southern New Jersey, but my dad, New York was where he worked a lot.
Right.
But certainly that tripod attack initially, they were going for that with the dust over everybody. Dude, super creepy.
I mean, what is it? The second most traumatic dusting in movie history?
Yeah. Yeah. I gotta say, when the ray guns start shooting and the people are getting vaporized and only their clothes are left, I had never seen anything like that in a movie before.
It was chilling, but not gratuitous. And I feel like that's perfect for a movie like this, for you're trying to aim it for kind of everyone to go to theaters and watch.
I don't know how they did that sound effect, but you know the sound when the bodies are getting turned to dust, it's like it's haunting.
It's you take a vacuum cleaner and you try to suck up like a cat toy.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's probably how they did it.
I mean, it sounds like it.
It's a great call out. One of the most effective shots in the film, that close up of the woman who's running when she gets vaporized, when there's like that screen that's frozen on her face, it's chilling because you realize, like, oh, it's not instantaneous. Like, you're gonna feel it for a second.
Yeah, and I think that panic and terror, you see a lot of scenes that create like that evoke mass panic, but this was a more personal mass panic because you have from the perspective of Tom Cruise's character. So you're on the ground and you're seeing everything around you.
And there's little nods to the 1953 movie. So they have the death rays that like vaporize people, the tripods, and then the very, very famous shot where the Bayonne Bridge freeway gets shredded,
right?
And all the cars drop and the houses explode. It's very hard to catch, but did you notice the green flash weapon that the tripods hit it with? That's from the 1953 movie.
Yeah, which is also like I've seen the 1950s film, and
it's awesome.
That's a very memorable movie.
Yeah,
which is why like part of like this film for me, especially being tied to a studio like Paramount or Universal, this evokes old Hollywood.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier about like the panic and the dread. The whole sequence in Bayonne, you just feel anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And you're trying to put yourself in this. You're like, what would I do?
Yeah.
I think it is kind of funny how a bunch of people are just staring at the tripods, and it's like you and me and my wife and everyone I know would have been running for our lives.
I think like that's where this film does a really good job of evoking the stakes and who are the characters that we need to root for, because at the end of the day, we put ourselves in their shoes, right? And so if we're putting ourselves in like Tom Cruise's shoes, this is all happening at breakneck speed, as it probably would in real life. In which case, how do you react? And that sense of feeling, like the whole time I'm just like thinking to myself, like, gotta get out, gotta make sure my family's okay. All right, what can we do? I want to help these people around me, but I have a split second to make a decision. People around me are dying. And when you're evoking that kind of emotion, and again, in a summer blockbuster, that's nuts.
Here's a question for you. Is this the purest horror movie Spielberg has ever made?
I mean, where do you rank Poltergeist?
He technically didn't direct it.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you want to put that, right? Like, I consider that a Spielberg movie.
I consider it a Spielberg movie.
Okay. You could probably say that or Jaws, but rewatching this twice in the past week, I forgot how disturbing this movie is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's not a conventional horror story, but it's a science fiction story with horror elements.
If someone wanted to call this a horror movie, I wouldn't disagree with them.
I'd say, I mean, I think that it has a ton of horror elements. I think there's just enough, like, I'd say adventure, or at least not adventure, but at least like enough sci-fi overtones that it's more of a thriller to me than just a straight up horror. But
I don't know.
Yeah.
There's some.
But like, yeah, don't get me wrong.
I know what you mean. Like there's not like Michael Myers level horror in it, but it has some of the most unsettling stuff I've ever seen in a movie.
I think that this is probably just using one of the most effective like film genres and using those techniques to be able to tell the story, I think is just what Spielberg really leaned on. And like we just touched on, you got Poltergeist, you got Jaws. Knowing the stakes of like either like what's who is at stake, I think maybe is a better question. Who is at stake?
One of the things I noticed, so other than some of the clothes that characters are wearing, which are of the era, and there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah.
And the technology, obviously, there's the flip phones, there's camcorders, okay, yada yada, whatever. I was blown away by how well this movie aged. The effects, you would not have any idea this is a 2005 movie. I would say this is some of the best work ILM's ever done.
Yeah, it's astounding, just like how well this ages, right? ILM's always on the cutting edge of just the amazing effects we see in films today. But even for a film like this, it's just home run.
Do you remember the shot when the tripod is coming out of the ground and it's sort of there's like a crater and it's kind of rotating?
Yeah.
And the church, which had cracked in half, starts to break apart and like the tower's falling. There's sunshine coming through, and I assume it's a blend of CGI and miniatures, but even 20 years later, I'm watching this, I'm like, how did they do that?
Yeah, it's just, again, little things like you said there that make you feel, that made me question, did I just see some CGI or was that a practical effect?
Right.
And
It
I
could
think
have come
that's,
out today.
yeah, and it's just so good.
Also memorable. The clothes falling is haunting.
Yeah, very well done.
Again,
Yeah.
it goes back to the thing you always say about Spielberg, right? Where you're like, every time you went to see one of his movies for a long time, you knew that you were going to get something that you hadn't seen before. And this movie did deliver on that.
And that's where I always really appreciate with Spielberg is that he has a very, he takes something fun and has just a very mature look at how to direct or how to even just evolve his take and his look. And you see that when you compare like something like this to, heck, what the other 3 films that he made like that same year or in the past 2 years.
Yeah. He's always adding stuff to his toolkit, too.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of handheld shots in this film. There's a lot of, I mean, there's very famous shots, right? Like, the best shot in this film is probably the most famous shot in this film, which is Tom Cruise and the kids in the minivan escaping from Bayonne, and the freeway behind them gets shredded.
Yeah.
The houses explode. It's some of the best CGI I've ever seen, still 20 years later.
Yeah,
It
and then
is miniatures combined with CGI. They did that for the Super Bowl advert.
now combine that with just not only the soundtrack or like even the score going on, but just these tripods just blaring at you.
Well, I mean, we can talk about the sound design. The foghorn, I
Yeah.
forgot how memorable it is.
Yeah, I remember that was one of the things that really stuck with me was just that usage of the foghorn for the aliens. They could have gone a lot of different directions with that. Like, do you have like a weird alien voice? But I would not have imagined foghorn. So I think that was really, really nicely done.
They don't overuse it. It's only 3 or 4 times in the movie. The other shot, which I don't think he gets credit for, so the 2-minute seemingly uninterrupted shot of them in the minivan where the camera's moving around 360.
Yeah, and then you have all the people then start to like kind of come in.
People? What do you mean? No.
Just the people surrounding the minivan.
No. When they're escaping on the freeway.
Oh yeah.
And it's just one, and it's apparently 9 different shots pasted together. You can't tell. I mean, you know what they're doing. But here's the most impressive thing about the effects for you, Anton. I found this on an AWN article. It was the quickest turnaround time in the history of ILM. They had about 3 months to complete 500 shots.
Yeah, and
It's unbelievable.
It's just nuts.
Yeah.
But I think like that's where you have the difference between a director with a clear vision to fast track a process on like how do we execute this, I want this on screen, versus you have sometimes directors that are a bit more like, hey, like this is what we want to do, go for it kind of thing. We'll fix it in post.
Right. You brought up the other scene in the minivan where Ray loses the minivan. In some ways, that's the scariest part of the film.
That or Tim Robbins looking into my soul, yeah.
We'll talk about Tim Robbins a little later. But when Ray loses the minivan and all the people are trying to hit it, it's because you realize, like, man, if something like this ever happened, we would all be screwed. We'd all just die. Society would collapse. There's no chance.
Because there's a cynical but almost realistic look at people will look out for themselves.
That's why I love Cruise's character in this, because remember when his son asks him, he's like, why aren't we on the highway? And he's like, because I don't want anyone to see that we've got a working car.
Yep.
And you're like, oh, yeah, you have to worry about other people.
Which is, Huey has opinions about this too. But I feel like it could have been any attack, right? It didn't necessarily have to be aliens. The movie really is more so about the paranoia of the people around us, the mass panic, and even just the people representing around us, the paranoia and navigating those events that will really, very highly stressful environments. And I feel like the question of how do people react in those environments and thinking about human nature in that regard is like, it's a very nuanced and much more mature conversation. And I'm not saying that it's a completely hopeless topic either, because otherwise, why does Spielberg have Tom Cruise's character and like Dakota Fanning, who clearly represent a much more hopeful look and outlook on how do we look at this future and work and good people around us. Notice I did not mention Goku.
Right, Robbie. It's funny you say hopeful. You're right. There is some hope in this film, of course, especially when we get to the end. But Spielberg wants you to feel hopelessness at several points in this film. And man, do you feel it. First of all, the train on fire.
Mm-hmm.
That's...
Or Dakota Fanning's at the river, then all the bodies.
It's effective. I keep saying the best shot in the film is fill in the blank, and I don't even know what the best shot in the film is, because I'm going through the notes and I'm like, that actually might be the best shot in the film. And here's my maybe nominee for you. The shot of the tripod appearing over the hill when they're about to get on the ferry and you just see the lights turn on. Holy crap.
And you're just like, we're screwed.
Again, when I'm talking about the hopelessness, you're like, oh my God, they're all going to die.
Yeah, or even just knowing the political undertones of having a Boeing 747 crash and all of the wreckage be on screen like that 4 years away from 9/11, that's insane to me.
Yeah. And
it's vivid. It's gratuitous.
It's really, there's no bodies in the plane, obviously.
No,
you didn't need there to be. Well, this is going way back to when I lambasted Hannibal. And I'm like, blood and gore do not make a movie better. You do not need those things to tell a story effectively. I don't need it in a film. I'm not opposed to blood and gore, but it doesn't add anything.
No, well, what we have instead is just like proper use of set and storytelling and like screenwriting. So, that builds a horror, that builds a suspense, and the dichotomy of that suspense along with having moments of hope, I think really did push this movie to, again, just more of an elevated blockbuster, at least when we're talking about this half of the film.
Yeah, we're still in the first half. The ferry scene is nightmare fuel.
Oh my God. Claustrophobic.
Dude, when the ferry comes out of the water, first of all, we haven't mentioned John Williams yet. The score is perfect. It's so unsettling. It's a horror movie score.
Look, I'm very great. Like my wife and I were just in LA in December, right? December, early January.
So before the fires.
Right before the fires. And I'm really grateful we weren't there in any of the parts that had to have like massive evacuations, just because it's like, I think of high density populations like Los Angeles and the thought of having to escape anything like that, whether you have to evacuate an area or you're running from something. It just sounds like chaos.
Did you watch any of the behind the scenes making ofs?
Yeah.
How they filmed the ferry? Giant miniature. Super effective.
Super effective. Yeah.
Yeah, again, the foghorn sound, the sound design in this movie, one of the better surround sound movies we've reviewed on this podcast, would you say?
Yeah, and just also very no throat. Huey agrees. Very effective sound. I was about to say this as more sound was filling the recording, but no throw was. No waste of sound in the film.
No. I forgot that I found this in the research. So that foghorn blaring sound, that is from the novel.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not quite sure how they did it. I was trying to look up like how they did the sounds in this film.
Well, want to know, even the design though of the tripods, that also lines up with how the Space Invaders have been designed in previous iterations.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember also very vividly to bring back a property that we've covered on the show, the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. In the comic book, the second series of the comic covered War of the Worlds, basically. So this aesthetic kind of matches and lines up with that. Just total sidebar, but something I remember.
No, it's a good point. Other technical aspects, because look, I want to give him a lot of praise here, because I've criticized Janusz Kaminski previously on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
His work on this film is incredible.
Do you think it's because he can make really pale people look even paler and scared looking?
I think that's one of them.
Yeah.
I think he is at his best when he's using dark, cool colors.
Yeah.
This film has plenty of that. It's pretty grainy.
It didn't make it feel dated, but it made it feel like there's a very distinct look to like the mid 2000s.
Well,
Yeah.
it's shot on film.
Yeah. And
You don't see a
then
lot of that anymore.
Dakota Fanning looks like the ghost of Christmas Past from Muppet Christmas Carol.
She's pale.
Yeah.
Yeah, but man, it's such an atmospheric look.
Yeah.
Kaminsky, I mean, you know what? He didn't get nominated for this or Munich in 2005, and I'm kind of blown away by that because both of those films are some of his best work.
Especially when you think about a film like Munich.
I can't wait to cover that.
It's just so, yeah, it was just very, very well done. I really do think that it's, how do you evoke kind of this, not, the word gorilla almost comes to mind because like, not necessarily like a hand cam like Cloverfield, but at the same time,
It
like
gets
you
shaky
have,
in some moments.
but you do have a very like, very realistic gravelly tone.
Yeah,
How
you can tell him and Spielberg took what they had used in Saving Private Ryan and applied like 10% of that here.
Yeah. It's just perfect because it just fits the aesthetic of just this very chaotic environment.
Completely agree. I mean, John Williams also nominated for this. He did get 2 nominations in 2005. He was nominated for Munich and Memoirs of a Geisha, which are just brilliant scores. This is an underrated Williams score. It's so rhythmic and unsettling. It's a horror movie score for sure.
Yeah.
And
very,
Williams traditionally does not do horror music.
It's very suspense driven. Right?
He knows when to not use the music too and when to bring it in. Like the tripod attack, again, to go back to that, the first couple minutes of that, there's no music. This movie got 3 Oscar nominations, visual effects, and both sound categories. It lost all 3 to King Kong. This should have won all 3. No offense, Peter Jackson. This has aged way better, in my opinion.
Very different films.
Very different. It's all opinion. I get it. But in conclusion about this first reason, which we've dragged on now for a long time, this is one of the best first hours of a film we've reviewed.
Yeah. There's no doubt about it. It's just on a technical level, just hits all the right boxes. It's very entertaining, and I'm just blown away by just how efficient it is, right? And just, yeah, again, just entertaining, which is what we need.
It delivers in every way. It over-delivers in every way possible. One more Spielberg quote about the 9/11 stuff, because there's no way to talk about this film without talking about 9/11, right? It was on our minds in 2005 a lot. And it's easy to forget this now, but you and me and everybody else, it was a question of when's the next attack coming? It wasn't like I went to school thinking about 9/11 every day, but it was in the back of our minds.
And certain visual aspects will always kind of evoke that thought of it. It's in the back, yeah, like you said, it's in the back of our minds, or it's on the top of our minds if you watch Reign Over Me.
Here's what Spielberg had to say about it. Quote, "A lot of what this movie is about is our response to terrorism. It's really about the mob mentality. That kind of collective fear is a dangerous animal. What we will do as a society that becomes a mob fleeing our collective lives, possibly at the expense of others?" End quote.
Yeah, it's asking those same nuanced questions that we touched on earlier. Very mature themes. But at the same time, a lot of directors try to ask those mature questions, and either it can come out really contrived, preachy, cheesy, but here it just comes off as very sincere.
It does, and what works for it is that if you didn't know any of the 9/11 context, you wouldn't have to, because the first half of this film still works.
Yeah, and it just evokes emotion, and those same emotive notes that Spielberg wanted to hit.
One thing I will add before we get to the second half. Once the tripods start to move, no more news comes out of that area. Man. I think the first half of this film is the best cinematic portrayal of an alien invasion ever put to film. We only get the character's POV. We have no idea what's happening in the rest of the United States, let alone the world, other than we get a couple snippets of news broadcast. There's something in Ukraine. We get the reporter giving some exposition to Tom Cruise's character, but it's all from his POV, and that That's exactly how it would come if this happened in real life. If the EMPs went off and
Mhm.
you would have no idea.
I think it's very well done, very effective. I think that other films that have similarly depicted alien invasions or building up of alien invasions, you don't do it as effectively as Spielberg does with the amount of time, because he builds all of that in like what, 10 minutes?
Yeah.
So like that's really well done. But at the same time, I show a huge amount of appreciation for like, our boy M. Night Shyamalan in Signs, where that's a bit more of a slow burn.
Right. Right. And Independence Day, which we both like, but it's a
Yeah,
cheesy movie.
very, 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 very different. There's many more bad depictions of invasion, like alien invasions. So,
Well, number 2 reason, the second half.
because
I would say the 65-minute mark.
then you have about like what, 30 minutes of the film left?
Yeah, a tad more, but the
Yeah,
movie's about 115 minutes.
right. Oh, that's right.
So about a little more than halfway through the film, we get to the farmhouse. The story comes to a screeching halt. I could barely get through listening to Tim Robbins.
That was really unnecessary.
I don't like his acting. I don't like the dialogue. I wanted to forward through everything.
And he just kicks it with them.
With Pete Schnapps, it's 15 minutes, but it feels like an hour.
All the momentum building up to that point is just thrown out the window.
It's like someone pulled the plug on the film.
And, no offense to Tim Robbins, but all offense to Tim Robbins, I just didn't like the performance.
Yeah, he sucks. He sucks in this role. I don't even say it's a miscast, because I know that the character is based on a couple characters from the books that they combined into his one character. I don't even know how they were supposed to maintain the pace from the first half of the film. I'm not saying I could have done better, but man.
And I feel like with Tim Robbins' character, he's supposed to basically represent like kind of this embodiment of like society at the brink of collapse. And
he sure was.
It just felt like a chore to have to watch his scenes, and then Tom Cruise like finally does what needs to be done, and then we can move on from his scene.
Puts him out of his misery.
Yeah.
5'7" Tom Cruise kills 6'5" Tim Robbins.
You're being very kind to Tom Cruise.
Because no one would have believed in the early years of the 21st century that our planet was being watched by intelligences greater than our own.
Or this is also putting back together the Tim Robbins and Morgan Freeman connection.
And then Ray killed him with an axe.
Did you ever watch the Robot Chicken Shawshank Redemption skit?
Yes.
With like Batman and the Joker? Oh, it's so good. Yeah, I feel like Tim Robbins just dialed it up a bit too much for this scene, and it just felt...
It's awful.
It just felt very out of place. Because up to that point, a lot of the character interactions were a bit more grounded, right?
Yeah.
And
like, do you remember where they're about to get on the ferry and they run into that woman that Ray knows?
Yes. Yeah.
That's really well done.
That was so what's really funny about that, how many people can see themselves in that very similar situation or feel like my dad would have done the exact same thing?
It felt real.
Yeah.
Everything up until this point, if you can put yourself into the shoes of a fictional alien invasion, feels real.
Yeah. But when you bring in Tim Robbins' very out of this world performance that just is deranged, is again not very grounded. I feel like maybe a more subdued performance would have been better. But no, on the get-go, the dude's crazy and you just know it.
Yeah, you know what kind of movie it is. Like I remember being disappointed in the moment in the theater. Like I was like, "Oh, what's going on here?"
Yeah, it's one of those moments that it's unfortunate because it really does bring down the movie quite a bit.
It does.
And when you think of the amount of time spent with that character, like you said, like 15 minutes, that's still a pretty large percentage of the screen time.
But it feels longer.
But it feels longer. And when you get that combined with just like the storytelling in general for the film, it just feels like a waste. And I would have preferred, again, just introduce a character like this, but then like you just gotta ditch them in like 5 minutes. It was just too much. Like, Tom Cruise should have realized really fast, like, this guy is about to have a mental breakdown, or he's going through one.
It's disappointing for another reason too, because it actually steps on a couple of things I think in the second half that are quite good. Because the common criticism of this film, which I mean both of us agree with, is that the second half sucks compared to the first half.
Mm-hmm.
And yet the second half has a couple of like really memorable, well done things. And like, first of all, like the Fields of Blood
Yeah.
is incredibly creepy and effective.
Yeah, it's not something that I remember from other adaptations.
Right. And it
It's
is
like,
from the novel.
yeah.
It's terrifying.
I feel like that was something it felt, not, when I say gratuitous, I don't mean it in like a super negative way. I mean it like that's effective, because you're able to kind of show a very gory element, but it doesn't necessarily feel like it's just too over the top, because the implications are just also so horrifying.
And then the scene where Dakota Fanning gets captured and he goes after her, which is the most heroic moment in the movie, obviously, for his character. And then they're in the basket of the tripod. I think it's pretty effective. The basket scene in the tripod, I think that's really effective.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty satisfying when he uses the grenades.
Yeah, it's very
quick.
Yeah, just very quick, very, I don't know, the word comes up a lot, but like very efficient. Like, yeah, that's smart.
I love how the soldier reacts when he
Mhm.
sees the pins got taken out. It's well done. It doesn't get as much credit as it deserves, I should say. But it is the rare Spielberg movie that doesn't quite know how and when to end. It kind of fizzles out.
When there's an adaptation of any like work, whether it's an old novel, it's trying to adapt like a movie that's already been made, artistic liberties of just how to kind of move the story one way or the other, that's on the director. And here, I kind of feel like there was an opportunity to maybe move it another way, but instead of zagging, it just kind of stayed zigging.
Or did it actually zag because a lot of other movies would have tried to do some cinematic ending of some giant victory where they figure things out and give the aliens a Windows virus?
Yeah, exactly. I'm just grateful we didn't build out an H.G. Wells cinematic universe.
You're right about that, because if they made this today, you pointed this out, so I want to give you credit for this. If they had done this today, there probably would have been some attempt to make a cinematic universe, and I'm so glad this movie doesn't do that.
Yeah, no, it just ends it. It's very clear. The aliens have lost. I still get reminded of not all adaptations that have to kind of stick by the novel as most accurate have to be the best interpretation. Like, a really famous example is that Stephen King short story that was adapted starring Thomas Jane. It's the one about like
21 or whatever?
No, it's the one about like the small town has been hit with like eldritch horrors and like creatures hitting the town, and the townspeople, and like the one crazy lady's like, we got to sacrifice the family, or the
Dreamcatcher?
No, not Dreamcatcher. Man, that movie. No, it was, man, I can't believe I can't remember the title. But basically, the ending that they end up coming up with just is a lot more foreboding, dark, but also more complete, and like also just superior to how the book ended. I'm just gonna look it up real quick.
So we can talk about the ending now.
Sure.
Because this movie just kind of peters out. It just ends.
Yeah.
It's the worst offender of the maudlin Spielberg criticism, would you say?
Oh my gosh.
The son being alive. It's absurd.
Yeah.
It's absurd. It is.
It's just, look, it's just, it makes...
He should have died.
I thought about it. Do you just need to write out because having the son there would have been like too much of a drag for the rest of the film? But like, otherwise, why have this character in the film at all? Because I don't think that there's a proper resolution for Tom Cruise's character to now be like, I have a good relationship with my son now because he survived.
Well, that's the thing. If you go back to the 65-minute mark, if it had been a situation where he had to let his son run off to his death in order to save his daughter, that is like an incredibly emotional, dramatic moment for his character and the story overall. And that's what I thought was going to happen if I was seeing this for the first time. And then at the end, Robbie just shows up like, hey guys, I'm fine. And you're like, how?
It's so weird. Okay, by the way, the film I was thinking of was The Mist, 2007.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, that's a dark ending.
It's a dark ending, but it is much more effective than the original ending.
I agree. I agree. Frank Darabont, Shawshank
Yeah.
Redemption, Tim Robbins. What?
What?
Yeah, no,
Nightmares and Dreamscapes? Yeah.
yeah, there you go.
Yeah. And like you posed this question to me earlier, how would I have ended this? And I feel like to kind of fit the theme of the story and how it's being told, you can still have a twinge of paranoia, whether it's is there something still out there without necessarily teasing out a cinematic universe, but you still embrace the hope of the family's going to stay together no matter what.
But don't worry, the aliens will be back for the sequel. Well, I think I know how to fix it, at least at face value. You keep the son dead, and imagine if he turns up in Boston with only his daughter, and it's a bittersweet ending. He's only able to save one of his kids. He feels horrible, but at the same time, there was nothing else that he could have done to save his son because his son's a dumbass and just wants to run off and like watch an interstellar war or something.
I was talking about how great the screenplay was in this film. That is one of the most poorly written things I've ever seen in a film.
It's terrible.
It's just it completely took me out of the film when I saw that.
Every time I see this movie now, I'm like, man, why did his son survive? It's not only mawkish, it's illogical.
Yeah.
He runs into a firestorm of war,
Right.
interstellar war.
And then I try to think about the son's characterization. Nothing indicates that he would ever do anything like this.
No, he's like, I need to see this. Like, see what?
Yeah.
You're seeing
like,
it. Like,
he's just, and before this, right, he's just characterized as he's just moody, hates his dad.
right. To be fair, I don't think Tom Cruise was a great dad.
Which is, again, like, I'm not.
No, nothing wrong with that. No.
Yeah, I'm not criticizing how it was characterized. I'm criticizing how his character makes a complete 180 and is suddenly emboldened to fight some aliens, or at least watch what's going on. It just came out of left field. And then he somehow survived. But he's an idiot. So how did he what?
Did he walk from upstate New York?
It's a long time. What's the course of time for this film?
A weekend.
Yeah, right?
So they spend the first
But they have to get to Boston.
Right. So they spend the first night in the basement of his wife's house. They spend the second night in the basement of the farmhouse with Tim Robbins. And then I think it's the next day they get to Boston. So it's maybe 3 days.
Because then you get there in the afternoon by day 3.
Right. Just in time for tea, which is what it looks like they're about to sit down to in Boston. This is the other hilarious part about the ending. There's some debris on the streets, Anton, but it looks like that part of Boston was just untouched by the alien. They come out wearing cardigans.
The continuity.
I'm talking about Miranda Otto.
Yeah. The continuity by the end was just really shoddy.
Like, hey, do you want a martini? Like, what's up?
Boston just looks fine. Boston does not look like Boston.
It's Brooklyn.
Because it's Brooklyn.
Also, if I was Tom Cruise, I'd be like, where the hell were you when I was saving our kids? Did you even leave the townhouse?
Right. There's also just kind of this big question of why is she still there? Or why is I feel like going into the ending of this film, it was just too, quote unquote, perfect.
Mawkish.
Yeah. For a very, very mature first part of the film, it just felt very, I don't know, night and day. With just this kind of, but it almost felt like you had a studio ending. And maybe I'm giving too much credit to, I don't want to believe that Steven Spielberg okayed an ending like this to a film.
He did, because he okays everything in one of his films. But he actually agrees with us, because this is what he told James Cameron in a one-on-one pseudo interview they did with each other, which you can find on YouTube. He said, quote, "That film doesn't have a good ending. I could never figure out how to end that damn thing," end quote. Cameron agreed with him, but then he blamed it on the source material. He said, quote, "I don't think H.G. Wells could figure it out," end quote.
You know what? That's where I wouldn't necessarily put the blame on H.G. Wells here.
I wouldn't either. What works for a book does not necessarily have to work for a movie. Especially
when that book being released at the turn of the century and you're kind of interpreting it from that lens. Something out of this world being defeated by something within our world probably is a bit more novel and fits in time and place of like being impressive in like 1900s. But especially when it kind of comes down to, okay, we have to write a screenplay that fits the emotion of the first half of the film, but also kind of closes out our story organically. Let's just say that taking the exact ending from the book probably didn't fit as much as we thought it, or that at least they thought it could have.
Right. And that's my point. I actually think the ending of the novel is really clever, how the aliens are defeated by bacteria.
Yeah.
But that's not cinematic, is it?
Or, I mean, you could also take the ending from The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and the aliens were actually defeated by like biological warfare. It wasn't like the common cold. They just got hit by like Ultra AIDS and SARS, which is like not an exaggeration. It's what they did in the book. But like, again, I think that trying to kind of come up with an ending that fits more so with this film, it's difficult, but I don't know. I think that my take, you embrace the paranoia, but you also embrace like the tinge of hope of kind of overcoming.
All right, Anton.
All right.
Working our way into sort of the ending, but the next reason why this wasn't better is the children. Because the other piece of criticism that's usually leveled against this film is that the kids are annoying, right?
I think they're just the perfect level of pain in the ass to try to keep alive during an alien invasion.
I agree. I mean, the other star of this movie was Dakota Fanning, who was a very big name at the time.
Yeah, huge name at the time.
Yeah.
And I think like she was very effective of, again, if you felt like it was overwhelming to have a screaming kid to try to keep alive during an alien invasion, it probably is overwhelming to try to keep a screaming child alive during an alien invasion.
I think her acting's brilliant. Yeah, she's annoying in certain scenes, but that's how some kids act. That's how anyone would act in that situation. I found her and Justin Chatwin's acting very realistic.
Yeah. I worry about the apathy of how teens are depicted, and I worry about my own teenage years now that, you know, you and I are going to be dads. But at the same time, like, I don't know, I don't think there was anything wrong with how Justin Chatwin depicted a teen. It's exactly probably how most would act, other than trying to then join the army to defeat aliens.
That was a little much. I mean, look, if you're going to steal that kind of retro Ford Mustang, kind of have it coming.
Look, so this was kind of my interpretation, and I feel like I think it was an extreme. So if the events kind of swirling around are also a representation for a post 9/11 America, the paranoia of like what's going around, and Tom Cruise maybe just represents like this, like parents trying to like navigate their kids through that kind of environment. Maybe Robbie represents like your kids that end up being sensationalized by the violence around them to then either join the army or get themselves caught up in like what's going on. And you lose one of your kids, and like the possibility of losing one of your kids that way is terrifying for any parent. So then they kind of depict that. So I think like that's a very compelling, like, I guess, message to try to tell through the film, or like that's at least what I glean. But it happened way too fast, and the characterization of it was just way too weird.
Yeah, I have to say, watching this recently now twice, the kids did not bother me as much as I remembered. Yeah, they were annoying, but it just came across to me as more realistic than anything else, and I can forgive that piece of it. The Tim Robbins stuff bothered me way more than the kids.
Yeah, I think that if the assignment was there has to be a bit of built stress around the environment because it's like you're trying to keep these kids alive and they're also stressed out too, I think they did a good job. And if someone feels a bit annoyed in that situation, it was probably on purpose.
Yeah. I mean, Justin Chatwin, he would go on to lose us over with his portrayal of Goku in Dragon Ball Evolution a few years after this.
Right.
I do like the scene where he's playing catch with Tom Cruise here.
Yeah, fun, effective. Again, it's grounded.
Yeah, yeah. Did you ever see the SNL sketch series called The Dakota Fanning Show?
No.
Oh, it's funny. they call her out for acting like a 30-year-old in a 10-year-old's body.
Who plays Dakota Fanning?
I think Amy Poehler.
Okay, yeah, that era of SNL. That's good.
But yeah, it's pretty funny.
Was Bill Hader in it?
I don't think so. I forget who was playing. So someone had Abigail Breslin
Oh, okay.
on there, and it was pretty funny.
I'm gonna assume Rachel Dratch, maybe.
I think so, but I could be wrong. I'm not an SNL expert like you are.
Big SNL fan, I'll tell you that.
Yeah,
But I
it's
haven't
worth
seen this
watching.
yet,
It's
so
definitely worth watching.
I will check it out.
Let's move on to the last reason, which is Tom Cruise. There's an on-screen piece to this and an off-screen piece to this.
Yeah.
Him and Spielberg did not take salaries on this film. They took points. They both made about $100 million off this. Not bad.
Yeah, not bad.
Not bad. It meant that DreamWorks didn't make a lot when it was all said and done, but
not make them happy.
You know, what are you going to do? I think his performance in this film is underrated. I think he's really good.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think that how often do you feel like Tom Cruise in a movie and his performance gets underrated, right?
Often.
Yeah, very often.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's especially this year. And I remember seeing a picture of Tom Cruise like on a red carpet, and I was like, for the first time ever, Tom Cruise looks like he's aging. Like for the first time ever. And I feel like people are gonna look back and they're gonna realize Tom Cruise was a much superior actor than he's been getting credit for.
I think he's finally starting to get the credit he deserved. I mean, he got a couple Oscar nominations along the way. He obviously never won one. But we always talk about this piece of it every time we review a movie that he's in, which is, you know, he's obviously a bigger movie star than he is actor, which is not the easiest thing to quantify. But I don't think it's controversial to say he is our greatest living movie star.
Yeah. I mean, when you think of movie star, like it's just dude's red hot, right? Dude's a supernova.
Right.
I feel like he just kind of guarantees multiple hundreds of millions at the box office for whatever film he's in. But to say this though, it's not without its criticism of where do we kind of look and see Tom Cruise taking a smaller role. And I think like that's a lot of the criticism, being able to see him take these much more art house roles that like other stars will take.
Well, he has done them though.
He has. But I think like it's kind of like now in his career, people are saying like, dude's doing Mission Impossible and like, yeah, just he kills it. But he's not necessarily saying yes to like, I don't know, Ferrari.
You're right about that. He's even a part like this. I think this is an underrated performance from him because he's not a hero in this film. Or
he's the protagonist. He's the protagonist.
But he does do heroic things, but you don't think of it as that kind of role. He's just trying to keep his kids alive. That's it.
Yeah.
It's a realistic role for him.
Yeah, and I think like that nuance is there's this really interesting thing I read in research for the film just around choosing someone like Tom Cruise for this role is like it's a two-edged sword. He's a big star and he'll be able to get you the butts and seats to see the film. But you're also trying to portray an everyman as someone who's just a blue-collar worker in New Jersey and also has family troubles, but is at the same time trying to keep his family together during a disaster. Certain actors fit the everyman label a bit more than someone like Tom Cruise. You're talking Tom Hanks. Funny enough, Tim Robbins. And when I say that, I say faces that really just, they're not exceptionally handsome, but they can kind of fit different layers and levels when you think of different characters that they can portray. Tom Cruise, almost a bit too handsome. I feel like he does such a great job in this role that I think it's much less double-edged sword, much more just fine execution.
Oh, I agree with you. I think he sells the everyman piece to this. He pulls it off.
And I think people are taking that for granted.
They do.
Absolutely.
Yes, 100%.
It's like don't tell me that the only thing Tom Cruise can do is like a Mission Impossible role where he's, you know, riding a motorcycle off of a cliff. Like he can be an everyman. He can play like a nuanced role.
Everything he does in here is realistic.
Yeah.
Like You know the part when they're getting in the minivan and he's telling Manny the mechanic, Christopher Moltisanti's friend,
Yeah,
to get in,
yeah,
and when he can't talk him into it, he just immediately tells Robbie to close the door and they drive away. Like, because he's already seen the tripods. He already remember right before they
yeah,
get in, he's like, "We've got about 1 minute."
yeah, yeah. It's just very
Totally realistic. And that's what I really like about the character. He's
yeah.
got a lot of street smarts. He is smart enough to own a gun. He's smart enough to know they have to sleep in the basement. Remember, he doesn't have any evidence. He's just like, no, 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 we're sleeping in the basement.
It's very realistic of someone that you would like. He really sells the street smarts aspect of it, right?
Yeah.
And again, I just don't want to take that for granted. I'd love to see Tom Cruise in like a much more grounded role that asks like these same questions that are a bit more nuanced and um at the same time not what you typically expect of a quote unquote Tom Cruise movie. Even that, you say Tom Cruise movie, there's a very clear association with what kind of movie that's going to be.
Well, he's got a lot of years left, I think.
Yeah.
So you never
So
know.
one can hope.
There's an off-screen piece to this too, Anton, which did
Yes.
affect this movie in the moment. The promotion for this film is when the famous, or infamous, I should say, Oprah couch jumping incident occurred.
Katie Holmes really loves Katie Holmes.
He really loves Katie Holmes at the time. Crazy to think this was pre-social media. I can't even imagine what this would be like now.
Super meme gif.
Yeah. So a few days after that, he appeared on the Today Show. He was being interviewed by Matt Lauer, speaking of canceled.
Ugh.
It was to promote this movie. It turned into what I would describe as an ill-tempered argument with Matt Lauer about psychiatry and prescription drugs. It made headlines. This is the interview where he criticized Brooke Shields for taking antidepressants, and it turned into a piece about Scientology, and it is worth watching.
It was also kind of around the same time it was also around the same time that you had the South Park chef situation.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
where Chef left the show, or Isaac Hayes left the show.
A Scientologist.
Again, a Scientologist, because of what was going on. Which more came out about that, by the way, like that it wasn't his decision, like wasn't completely his decision to leave the show. He got a lot of pressure from the Church of Scientology to leave.
I think so, and correct me if I'm wrong. We didn't really know anything about Scientology until around this time because of these incidents, right? I don't remember ever knowing much about Scientology as a kid. I had heard of it, but
yeah, I mean, I told you at least like my very anecdotal story of growing up. There was always it didn't say like necessarily Church of Scientology, but it said like, or at least it did say Scientology, but like a lot of the posters around it was like Dianetics, which I think is one of their books or something.
Yeah. L. Ron Hubbard wrote that book.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously his writings were always public, but you didn't know much about it, right?
Yeah, and like I knew nothing about it. All I knew was growing up, when you walk past that building, that's where people were outside. They had flyers and they were trying to get you to come inside and like take like some sort of test. All of my friends just trolled the crap out of them just growing up because no one took them seriously.
Right.
Until you get around this time period. And I vividly remember once all of the media buzz around Scientology resulted in actual people protesting the Scientology building in my hometown downtown in front of the building, and they had eventually closed. So it's like I really did see that real time that people were suddenly in outroar about Scientology.
It was definitely around this time, you're right, because this was a major turning point for Tom Cruise. To my knowledge, this was the last time he ever really publicly spoke about Scientology, and he has been much more guarded about his public image since. Now, of course, I think this was probably, would you say, the lowest point of his career? Because he has had pretty much an uninterrupted run of success since the early 1980s, which is insane to think about. Since he became a star, he's never really had a downtime. But I think this is the period where there was the most public backlash against him.
I think that it was probably his most scrutinized moment, but he recovered pretty quickly.
He did. for
Yeah,
sure.
I mean, what is it? Tropic Thunder.
Yeah,
He was he
right,
was good.
right.
He was good.
It was definitely brief, but of course, this film is famous for another reason. This was the film that ended the relationship between Cruise and Steven Spielberg. Now, since the Top Gun sequel has come out, they have apparently mended fences and are friends again, but they did not have anything to do with one another for a long time after this, because some of what I'm about to say is taken from the book that I have referenced many times on this podcast at this point, The Men Who Would Be King, which is a history of DreamWorks. Cruise allegedly tried to recruit Spielberg to Scientology during the filming of this, allegedly.
It's like, why do that? Like,
I don't, it's a, look, this is just from the book.
literally iconic Jewish icon Steven Spielberg.
Right. I privately, Spielberg felt that Cruise's antics during the promotion of this film had a negative impact on it. He thought that the film should have made more money, and it didn't because of what Cruise did and said. But here's the coup de grace for their relationship. Spielberg told Cruise the name of a doctor who had prescribed medication for a relative, and subsequently, the doctor's office in question was picketed by members of Scientology.
Oh my gosh.
Spielberg and his wife were very upset by this, and this is allegedly what led to their relationship deteriorating, and they have never
Yeah.
worked again, which is a shame because, I mean, look, this film isn't as good as the first one that they worked on together, but like Minority Report is an awesome movie. It really is.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, like, we have an example in this film of just like when you have the perfect elements together of just great acting, great writing, great directing, great everything. It makes for some amazing film. And all of his, I guess, I don't know how you want to call it, like, controversy aside, I think that a Tom Cruise Spielberg collaboration would be very welcomely embraced
Yeah,
if it
I'd
were to
love to
happen.
see another
Yeah,
one. I think we can wrap it up.
yeah, yeah, man.
All right, I'll go first. We had a very long discussion, you and I, just now. We talked
Hmm.
about the first half, the second half, the ending, the children, Tom Cruise. We talked about a bunch of stuff, Anton. This is a hard film to rate because it's really two movies for me. The greatest alien invasion movie ever made with those set pieces in the first half. And then the scenes with Tim Robbins and the house, which nearly ruins the movie. And it's confounding because I really stand by the fact that the first half of this is peak Spielberg. It is some of the greatest stuff I've ever seen in a movie. It's a triumph. It's terrifying. Is it disappointing? Kind of, because of the second half. And I'm again judging this by the Spielberg standards, which are impossibly higher than any other filmmaker, right? This is the guy who's made Raiders of the Lost Ark, Schindler's List, Jurassic Park, Jaws, E.T. No other filmmaker is going to have their work compared to that kind of stuff, right? Or very few filmmakers, I would say. The second half is a big drop off compared to the first half. And I think despite those flaws, I was really pleasantly surprised by how well I thought this film held up 20 years later. I would absolutely recommend it for the spectacle alone, especially if you have a good TV and a good sound system. This is an incredible movie to experience under those circumstances. It's not something that I'm going to rewatch regularly, but I am glad that we covered it. I would definitely watch it again. And I think this movie falls just short of greatness, and I'm going to put it at a B minus.
Yeah, very, love your take here. I think that for me, this is a film that has a much superior film in it if we were to cut out a decent chunk. And we all know what chunk I'm talking about. But I cannot deny that the technical expertise in this film just again goes to show the transformative power of film. There's so many callbacks to just old Hollywood that I really appreciate, this being like a big budget production from one of the long-standing studios. And with a legendary director behind it, I feel like you can't help but just appreciate what it is able to succeed upon. Now, the parts of it that are very entertaining are quite entertaining, but the big drawback are the parts that are bad are very bad. And I think that I really shouldn't look at it within each separate kind of aspect within a vacuum, because that's unfair. I feel like I have to look at it as a complete experience. And I don't really necessarily see myself being in a situation where I just want to watch the first half of this film. I think in terms of the exercise of like watching the film, seeing the first half, analyzing and seeing how great it is a fun exercise. But as a film, I don't think as a complete film, it's just as entertaining. I think it's really the drawbacks really are in that second half. Anything around Tim Robbins and his kooky character and just this very confusing just characterization of Goku and whatever adventure he went on during the film. So I think that for me, there's enough entertainment in the film that like I really do appreciate it, and I think that I'm going to watch it again in the future at some point. But I don't think I'll necessarily revisit it. It does fit this category of I'm going to like recommend it, but there will always be a caveat. I will always say, but you can probably like, don't have to worry about these certain parts of the film. And I feel like that to me just is more of just kind of what the detriment to like what could have been like a fantastic, like, dare say perfect film. I put this for me at a C plus. Maybe let's revisit it in like, 2 years, see how I feel. But for now, for me, this is a C plus.
So Spielberg's next film, which is going to come out either late this year or next, is a sci-fi film involving aliens.
And cowboys?
I don't know about the cowboys, but definitely aliens. It's called The Dish. Like any Spielberg film, I look forward to it.
I'm ready for more Spielberg. I think we need it.
Look, he's almost 80 years old. We need to cherish this man because who knows how many more films he has in him.
Yeah. And I'm just going to, again, when you go to either Universal Studios or like for any listener that has had the chance to do this, I don't know how often people think about going to like different studio lots or like going to different studios like in Los Angeles, Burbank. When you get a chance to actually see like where they make these films and just the sound stages, the studios, they really embrace the history. It's amazing. And this film absolutely kind of fits into that chapter of being an important part of movie history, for better and worse.
For sure. Well, that's it for War of the Worlds. Next week, Anton, it's a very special episode. It's the 40th anniversary of A View to a Kill.
Oh my goodness.
So I hope you and the rest of the listeners are ready to dance into the fire.
Yeah, I'm ready. I am so ready. How much champagne do we have on that submarine?
I think he had vodka.
Oh, okay.
And no shower.
Just caviar.
Yeah. You're talking about the sex boat?
The love boat?
Yeah, there's no love. It was all sex.
Yeah. I'm sure it smelled terrible in there.
Awful. I actually felt bad for the woman. I did.
It's fun for like maybe a few hours, and she's like, we have 3 more days on this thing.
Yeah. Anyway, if you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please give us a follow and a 5-star review. Be sure to check out our YouTube channel as well, where we have subscription levels. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And for those who would like to support us directly, we have a Patreon. Links are in the description. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.